what's up, Headspaces? Viwe Joka, once again, the brother from the ancient mother. We're talking to photographer Lonwabo Ngcwayi. I hope I'm saying it okay.
Yeah, that's the right way.
No doubt. We're here at Power Talks. Again, the theme is power, empowerment. And Woody, just for our subscribers, I want you to kind of give us a sense of what power means to you, first and foremost.
Yeah, hey, I've been getting this question quite a bit today.
Yeah. And then maybe it'll be easier to answer it.
Yeah, so I mean, I've thought a lot about what it means, and I think what I do whenever I think about anything, I like to put things on a page, right? And even with thoughts, I lay them down in my head, right? And the words that came out almost immediately were words like force, strength. And I then started to question, but could that be definitions of power truly? That power is some form of a force, some form of strength. And if it is strength, what kind of strength is it? So I think what I then ended up on was just the idea that a lot of power, especially in African cultures, more specifically the Xhosa culture that I grew up in, and if you juxtapose that with almost like European and Western ideologies of what power is, you start to see that we don't necessarily share similarities. Their pursuit of power is, like I was saying when I was speaking about my images, is very outward. It's about conquering, but our idea of power is almost like an inward kind of a thing. It's like going in, and it's about the person, and if that's powerful, then you are powerful as a person. So I think for me, I ended up, the truest definition for me, the simplest, is that amandla anobulali, which basically means power is gentle, right? It expresses itself in gentle themes and gentle values and virtues, like ubuntu. That's a very powerful thing to think about. And it's so powerful that as an idea on its own, ubuntu has affected so many other cultures. God, it comes from the Xhosa culture. And it's a small virtue, it's a small idea, but it's something that we hold so virtuous, and it's quite powerful. So that's how I approach that conversation.
It's powerful, it's gentle. Do you think art has a duty to empower others, or do you think art, because it stems from the self, and you spoke about this empowerment being internal, do you think the artist owes it to themselves first, or there's an implied sense of what the implications that your art has on the world also holds a strong level of influence?
Can you repeat that question?
So let me ask it in the simplest way possible. Does art have a duty to empower, or is it purely a vehicle for artists to express whatever is in their souls, without really having to think of the implications it has on others?
The implications.
Or should an artist, whether they're holding a camera, a paintbrush, a pen, think about how it will affect other people? Or is it truly a self-expression mechanism that truly is really about the intimate engagement with you?
Yeah. So I think that's a question we're still trying to answer, right? I think it's probably a question that maybe the first two artists in the world they were asked that question. We see that this is beautiful, you've made this beautiful thing that expresses who you are, but do you actually see how many things it has affected? So that then there needs to be a balance of the two things. The obvious thing is that speak your mind, speak your truth, but before then know what that truth is. Because I think a lot of people spend a lot of time in this idea of what an artist is, right? And the on the surface part. But I'm trying to actually make the point that it's within. Once you go in there, right? And the things that you then bring out, that stuff you have to be willing to take responsibility for any outcome that you will face. So if I go in and I find whatever, I bring it out into the world. For instance, my images that you guys saw. Somebody takes offense to it. I need to be liable for whatever comes from it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it is self-expression, 100% express yourself, but at the same time, take responsibility for the outcome.
Right. Take responsibility. I love that. And lastly, I want to say we are contextualizing this country, South Africa. You are in the context of the Eastern Cape, Viwe Joka. I have connections there as well, my mother's side of the family. So as you spoke your story, a lot of what you were depicting resonated with me. I want to ask, maybe it's too general of a question, but I'm still going to attempt. What do you think is our power as South Africans right now?
Yo, man, I actually have been thinking a lot about that. And so I work in the advertising space, right? And I get exposed to like the other side of the process, you know, before brands speak to people. So like the concept design and concept development and all the way through to creative, right? And so what that has taught me is that the media that has been out, like the stuff that has been created, is tired, right? So we've explored all other cultures in the world. We've seen American culture more than any other culture. We've seen Japanese culture. Japanese culture is very deep, so we're still exploring that culture. But African culture is the only one that the world hasn't fully tapped into. So now we're beginning to see that with the introduction of, for instance, Afro beats, right? Amapiano, through sound. But then also they are looking at imagery, right? So if for instance, you're looking now at image galleries like Getty Images, trying to find images of ordinary South Africans or Africans, that's not something you easily find. So, which means there's a big gap for us. This doesn't mean young people in South Africa or in Africa have not been creating. It just means that we have been creating the wrong kind of stuff. The stuff that is not reflective of who we are. Right? So I think also right now is the perfect time and the perfect opportunity for us to start doing that. Because now there's words and phrases like Afrofuturism, right? Which basically Afrofuturism is taking what the world thinks Africa is, and then puts science fiction themes to it so that it's easily digestible, right? So that it's easily palatable for the rest of the world.
Makes me think about Wakanda.
So that Africa has room in the world's perspective of where the future is going.
100%. So we can now come into those spaces and actually say, no, this is not how we see ourselves. But the conversation has been open, you know. So I think even for me, like Ubuntu was saying, this is my first time ever coming into an exhibition. I've been working in the commercial space. So coming into the self-expressive, self-reflection kind of space is only now. The reason why I came in is because I'm seeing that there's a gap. The world is listening to African stories. So I think we have a room. I don't know if I answered your question.
Articulately, Siyabulela kakhulu for giving us a moment to talk all things power and all things art, because really we are at a point, as you mentioned, where the world is looking on Africa, and Africans themselves have so much stories to tell visually and so much real authenticity to give the world about ourselves, because so much has been depicted about us that wasn't really true. It was to the eyes of people who wanted to disempower us. So now that we have the opportunity to use our art to empower ourselves, I for one am glad that we have artists like yourself who think about these kind of things. So yeah, basically all your social media handles to all our subscribers.
Lonwabo Ngcwayi on Instagram. I actually want to change my name, like Lonwabo Ngcwayi.
Okay, you know, that's what it does.
So on YouTube you can find The Pursuit of Self. That's a channel that I laid my stuff, just a few things, but I'm going to start a vlog soon.
Nice one.
On Facebook you can find me Lonwabo the Photographer. So those are my three.
Thank you. Lonwabo Ngcwayi, The Pursuit of Self, Lonwabo the Photographer. Links will all be in the description. Thank you so much for giving us a piece of your valuable time in this space right now.
Sure.
Yes.
I am a photographer. I am from a small town that's in Lonwabo. It's between Grahamstown and
Yeah.
Williamstown.
Yeah, man.
I grew up in a rural village there, Yasenkisika. If you are driving on that road going to King Williamstown, you won't miss it.
Yeah.
So growing up in that rural space, I think there were a lot of things that I unconsciously downloaded, and over time come into a suburban environment like PE. I then began to neglect those things, right? And I think I started pursuing so much more of the stuff that you learn from the TV, because that's the only space that you can access the rest of the world to
Yeah.
we access a lot of the world through TV, and it basically informs you and builds a lot of ideas for you. What is beauty? What is power? What is wealth? And you start to chase those things. And I think even with my work, my photography, for a very long time I was trying to create or recreate things that I'd seen in magazines, in TV. In fact, Ubuntu, when he approached me, he was asking for my studio work, because that's what people know me for.
Yeah.
You know, all the technical lighting stuff. And I've shot a lot of people, very beautiful images in studio, you know, but the time that he sent me the email asking me if I want to be part of this, I'd spent a lot of time doing a lot of deep digging within myself, asking myself questions about where I come from, you know. Why is it that my work doesn't reflect any of those spaces and any of those messages? So when the pandemic hit, I was fortunate enough to be invited to a wedding in Maclear. So a lot of this work, all except for that one image with the two people, I created on the way to Maclear and Chakini. So this one actually is my favorite. And I think a lot of people don't really understand what it is. For me, it's actually the title of this, Iti Imbepo Eliloli, which means a gentle breeze, a beautiful breeze.
Yeah.
And the reason why I decided to title this is because last month I discovered that Imbepo,
Yes. I see.
I didn't even know. You know,
I could see.
So when I shot this, I was driving to Mthatha to the wedding. And on the way there, I saw these two trees. There was a tree here and another one here that were standing basically in this vast space.
Yeah.
But what is interesting for me is the shape of the tree. Why is it growing towards one side? So I decided to stop and basically walk a kilometer into the landscape to go understand this space. And for me, it just felt so beautiful, and I decided to photograph. But what I was picking up was the fact that these images in the space didn't have a sense of balance. So I needed something to put in the foreground. And then I just saw these small plants. I remember wishing there were sunflowers. I was like, I wish there were sunflowers. I shot it like that. I think the reason why I wish there were sunflowers is because it would make sense why the tree was growing towards that direction. Because the sun rises on this side and then sets on the other side. You know, so maybe that's a sun tree. You know, so yeah, but I shot it like that, and as soon as I discovered that this is Imbeko. What is Imbeko in English? Does anyone know? Yeah. So for me, it just started to breathe. It just felt like an image that's a very soft, gentle breeze, and that's why I titled that image like that. Okay. So this one, I was in town Twakseng all the way after Mthatha, and I was seeing this man walking through the mist. Before I saw him, there was a guy who was on a horse who was wearing a blanket, right? But I missed his shot, so I stopped because I wanted to turn around and go ask that guy to do it again. Yeah, but when I stopped, I then saw this guy. There was another dude walking behind him, which I removed in the image. I think I removed him because of the way he was walking. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those township guys walk like this. Yeah, and then he was looking back, and it sort of felt like that would be another image in itself. You know? If I had shot him alone, it would have been a perfect image. In fact, if I kept him just and removed this guy, and you would have this line that almost leads you to him. It would have been complete. So, but for me, the reason why I kept this guy in the image, it reminded me of the idea of umhambi in the Xhosa culture, you know, which is a very important person because umhambi carries the messages from one village to the next. You know, we're very excited to welcome umhambi into our homes because he's bringing something. You know, we may not know what it is, but he's carrying something, a story to share, a poem, or things that he's seen on the way. You know, so I titled this image "Ngihlala Nginawe," and I think for me it just spoke that message. You know, and I think it's a really positive thing to think and to understand that even when you walk through these things or through the valley of the shadow of death, you are never alone.
Yeah.
You know, so
And then all
the way in Hamakwe, it's full of mist. It's a very beautiful space. So then there's this image. This image, I actually didn't shoot this. I was just the guy who was lucky enough to hold the camera and press the shutter, because I didn't even know that these two figures were aligned perfectly like that until I was editing. So what we wanted to do when we shot the image, we just wanted to shoot a cool photograph of basically two people to basically speak on the idea of the LGBTQI community, right? It was meant to be that. But what we didn't know was that these two figures perfectly aligned, you know. So when I saw that, I was like, well, this is not a picture that I created. It's something I was just part of, you know. In fact, if I'd been the one to shoot this image, I would have shot it differently. I would have composed the skyline so that it crosses somewhere here and doesn't behead this person. You know? So I would have framed it differently if I had thought about it. But the fact that it was something that created itself, it just felt more powerful for me. And I decided to title this image "Ndingumuntu Nam Njengawe." And I think if we want to have this conversation of identity and gender and all these things, the base of it is the fact that nam ndingumuntu njengawe. And we need to remember that we need to have muntu, and that's the sympathy and also just the understanding of the fact that we're all human. Whether you are gay or this or that and everything else, at the end of the day, we're human.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's this image. I love this one. I think it's a really interesting photo. A lot of people think I photoshopped the sky into this image. I did not. I shot it like this. I shot it with an 85 lens. I think I love this image because what I didn't realize when I was shooting the stuff in my clear, there's a lot of images like this one, was that I was unconsciously creating this space, this vastness of space. Maybe because I grew up in the rural areas, a lot of things in the rural areas are vast. You know, the shop is over there. You know, the school is over there. You know, I even had a memory of us talking about, you know, umntu ohamba kude. Sikhwazi nah uya umntu. You know, so kind of felt like that. Kind of felt like ngathi siyakhwaza, siyakhomba. And but more than that, it reminded me of the sense of community that exists in rural areas and also maybe in townships, you know, where women support each other. You know, I remember my grandmother, when I was a boy trying to watch TV at home, she would always say, "Uyathanda umamela indaba zabantu abadala," you know, and there's always a sense of community. Women shared very strong, powerful, sometimes heartbreaking stories with each other. So it just reminded me of those moments, and I decided to title this one "Awambi Wedwa," which speaks on the fact that, you know, there's a sense of community in the rural areas. Right. So this one, I actually had like a selection, maybe I think 3 images that looked at this one, right? Yeah. And the other one that I did not select technically looks so much better than this, right? But this one, for some reason, I spent a long time looking at it than the other one. The other one I could make sense of what's going on. But with this, it just kept me looking for a long time. And I could see the guy, lifting up his hands. And most people actually think it's a blurry image. It's not. It's a double exposure. So that means it's basically 2 exposures shot on the same frame. And then I think for me, this image is interesting because there's so many things here that speak about Xhosa, in the society that we grow up in. Even in Ndonga, you could spend a long time thinking about Ndonga. Ndonga ihlala emgqubeni. Ndonga is the thing okolulwa ngayo umuntu. It's also the thing that men use to abuse their children and their wives. So there's a lot of stuff that you could take away from the image, and I think it's a very powerful image. And also seeing the RTP houses over there in the back, and the faces of the children in the image really keeps you focused as well. So this one, iti umanyano, which basically means unity. Right. Then the last photograph is an image of the most powerful people in the village.
Or doves.
Mama, they are very powerful. I mean, even if we think about, like, on the surface, the idea that this happened during COVID, like deep in COVID, but they still came to a wedding. You can even see that they're wearing masks, all of them. They came to support Ummelwane and cook for basically the entire village. I decided to title this one Indlezane Enommele Omde, which speaks to the whole idea of a long-breasted woman who's able to feed the entire village. And actually that's what they do. They cook for everyone, and they are the unpaid labor of the village. And I remember as a boy, I used to and then come back, and I would basically, it was almost like this taste exercise I was doing to see which one tastes better. And it was always the ale all the time. They added the spices and everything, So I think this is actually my favorite image, because if we want to talk about power, this is the gentle form of power, the kind of power that really commands, And so the reason why I decided to select these images and not the studio stuff that Ubuntu was so interested in, and that would have looked really cool aesthetically speaking. But I think for me, the idea that I was doing a lot of soul searching, trying to find what's going on here. Why do I think the way I do? And one of the things that I realized was that the pursuit of power should not be an outward journey. It really needs to be almost like an inward journey. Even if you think about how a tree expresses itself through, the branches and the leaves. But before you see that, it first expresses itself through the roots. So that's what I want you to think about when you look at this work, that you really have to find first the root where you come from, the home, And I was also fortunate enough to spend time with musicians around this time, like Reese over there. And one of the things that I learned from musicians and also music was how the 8 notes of music, let's maybe say now it's C, D, E, F, A, B. What is it? C, D? What is it, Reese? C, D, A? Yeah. And then back to C, right? So the idea that it's almost a gradual climax that starts and ends at home. So for me, it's a reminder of that home is exactly what we need to pursue. And then sharing those with the world. And that's basically the work.